to the point, and it's not mixed with attachment, which people hate.
Mm. Okay. And how would you? Do you have any thoughts or words on how you would go about diminishing these feelings of attachment, say, towards your children, which I think a lot of people are taken aback when they hear that. Would you kind of focus on their essential nature, or?
Well, I mean, really, I mean, for a Buddhist, you probably don't want to um, focus on lessening attachment to your children at the outset, because of course, a certain level of attachment to your children is basically natural.
Mm.
I mean, monks and nuns, that's why they go into the monastery, not to have family life that causes so much drama. And so, I mean, if you have a family, then of course you just would want to focus on being more kind to them. Basically, you focus on cultivating compassion, and compassion is wishing all beings, regardless of if they're the closest to you or enemies or whatever, to be happy. So in that sense, you kind of, if you're really sincere about it, you'll probably then have more clarity, because you know if you want your son Bobby to be a great doctor, then whenever you look at your son, all you see is your son relating to your attachment. So here's Bobby the doctor, and here's Bobby as he actually is. So you're not really seeing him as he is. You're seeing him as being inferior to what you want him to be here. So if you then focus on compassion, and if you just focus on him being happy as he is, then this will disappear. You will see him more clearly, and whatever paths he has in life, he's gonna, you'll be able to be more helpful to him, because you see him as he is. You don't see him as being inferior relative to what you want him to be. And that's how a lot of people start drinking, because their parents or whoever, not necessarily their parents or their society, whoever it is, kind of embeds them with a sense of inferiority relative to what they're supposed to be. So, if you have children, the best thing to do would just basically to try to cultivate compassion. That doesn't mean that you let them do whatever they want to do, but you guide them from the point of view of how can you maximize their actual potential, as opposed to how you can fit them into a perfect mold that maybe you wish you would have done if you were their age, but you're not their age and it's over. So just let them be them, I guess, something like that. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So attachment is normal, but having a sense of dissatisfaction with life is also normal. And if you want to get rid of that normalcy of being dissatisfied, then you have to get rid of that normal mechanism of attachment, or at least lessen it somewhat, because so much of our lives, especially as adults or young adults, is lived in relation to expectations, or lived in relations to the past. So you remember the glory years, or you look forward to the glory years, but you're not actually living in your life as it is happening moment to moment. And the reason you're not living in that life is because of that kind of mechanism of attachment. So the question is, the question you have to ask yourself is, are you going to be happy by having things, or are you going to be happy by training your mind to be happy?
Mm-hmm. So how would one, if they took that into their philosophy of non-attachment, how would one, say, plan for their future or set goals if they're not attached to a certain outcome?
They would set goals they would set goals by kind of looking at their situation as it is and being realistic about their goals. They wouldn't expect ultimate happiness to come from their goals or ultimate happiness to come from the future. They would expect ultimate happiness to come from the way their mind works. So, of course, the future will happen, but the future is something that you should make preparations for. But preparing for the future, planning for the future is normal and healthy. But when you're planning for the future, you shouldn't imagine yourself living in the future or controlling your future. And you should plan for the future by focusing on the present moment, realizing that the future basically starts now. So the best way to really plan for the future is by cultivating a calm mind, because whatever you plan for the future, your plans, it's like the famous Chinese saying, you want to make God laugh, you have to show him your plans. So, however, whatever happens in the future, if you have that insurance policy of a calm mind, if you have that mental insurance policy of not being spastic about things, then whatever happens in the future, you'll be able to react to it in a non-negative way, in a non-emotional way, and so to maximize your productivity in the future, you have to focus on the now and focus on being mindful and calm and relaxed and flexible. Really, you want to be basically flexible, because if you have a child and you want to teach them one thing, sometimes people teach their children to just trust people, or to be careful, or to whatever. But if you teach your child to rely on themselves, rely on their kind of the calmness of their mind, and if you teach them that everything is impermanent ultimately, so you can't really rely on anything because it will fall away. The only thing permanent is your kind of mind stream. So whatever happens to you in the future, the foundation for whatever happens is your mindset. So if someone runs into the spark with a gun, I could panic and kind of react with an emotion, and then that emotion could paralyze me. Or I can be calm and kind of, instead of focusing on the gunman, and how much I'm afraid of him, I could focus on where's the nearest fence, and then be flexible enough to like sneak through it. Something like that.
And I'm curious, this whole notion of impermanence, it kind of throws me off with respect to does everything matter or does nothing matter? And how to relate to reality with the notion of nothing lasts, and do the actions I do today, I guess in the long run, matter, which I believe they do, but in the ultimate sense.
Well, I mean
and how to ground yourself, I guess, in this.
Right, because I mean, if you, I mean, it's challenging to ground yourself in impermanence, and I don't pretend to be grounded in impermanence at all. But if you do manage to ground yourself in impermanence, you're basically grounded in reality. Mm-hmm. You're grounded in the ultimate way, because you're basically grounded on nothing. Mm-hmm. And whatever comes and goes, you're ready for it, because everything will have the quality of impermanence. But kind of submerging into impermanence doesn't mean that you're submerging into indifference, that you're just kind of, that you're a nihilist or you don't give a damn. It's basically, you understand that what creates the future moment is your interaction with the present moment. So so although kind of my reaction to the present moment isn't permanent, it does create the next moment of my life. So if someone comes here and like punches me in the face, the way I react to it could create my whole day. Like if I get fixated on it for the whole day, then I'm kind of being punched in my face for the whole day in a way, psychologically, which could be worse than the physical experience. And then I could fixate it for the next week or the next year. I mean, sometimes people go through a trauma and then they fixate on the trauma for the rest of their lives. So if they just understood as being an impermanent and understood the reaction to that trauma as something that paves the way for the rest of their life, then they might have a healthier approach to it. Mm-hmm. And another thing about, as we're talking about attachment, that the antidote to attachment is not detachment. Because detachment is another kind of act of reaching out, except instead of reaching out, you're kind of slapping down that attachment. So, that's not Buddhism. That's just kind of wasting your time. I mean, if your whole life is just reaching out and then slapping down that attachment until you become numb, that's not Buddhism. Buddhism is by focusing not on the attachment, but on the mechanism that creates it. And instead of stopping that mechanism or trying to halt it again and again and again and becoming numb, which is something what people do sometimes, you would focus on that mechanism, and instead of creating attachment, it would create compassion, create a sense of interdependence with everything, create a sense of happiness. So you're working with that mechanism. You're not trying to dismantle it or break it down. You're trying to reconfigure it.
Okay.
All right.
Okay. Thank you.